Alright, hey, this is Fred Schneider, Colorado Dwarf Cars, and we're going to do a chassis setup seminar. Hope you enjoy it, and we'll go through the basics. And the first thing I'd like to say about chassis setup is the whole goal in racing is to be able to get through the turns the fastest. Usually it's the person who can go through the turns is the one who's going to do the best. And the whole concept is that when you go through the turns, your car rotates over to the right side or the outside if you're racing on the oval. And we want through the turns to be able to have equal contact to the track with weight and grip on all four corners. So that's why you'll come to learn in our training today is that the weight distribution is going to be set up more left, and this car conducive to turning left much easier than turning right. And the whole idea is that when you're going through the turn, the car rotates over and weight shifts, and you'll be more equal on all four contact patches. That's the name of the game, is get all four contact patches working at its maximum capability. Okay, well, when you set up a car, you work from the back to the front. Before we do anything, you want to make sure all your fluid levels are full. So we have our radiator. We want radiator here. And in Colorado, I highly recommend using antifreeze because if you use water and your engine freezes over the winter, you'll be buying a new engine in the winter. Well, so we have our water level. We'll have our master cylinders for our brake fluid filled. We'll have, of course, our gas tank full. These gas tanks were allowed a maximum 5 gallons of gas, and I highly recommend a 5-gallon gas tank. I've tried a 3.5-gallon gas tank before, and it's if you forget to fill up and top it off, you tend to run low in a main event. You can, and of course that doesn't work well. I want to point out a couple things about the gas tank and the gas tank lid. Now, the gas tank lid has a vent on it, and you can see mine's all dirty and needs to be cleaned off. But this is a vent, and this vent here is real important to keep that clean. And I'm saying maybe once or twice a year, clean it off. You take a Phillips head screwdriver and you take this off, and you'll see it's pretty simple to put it back together again. But you clean it out, because if this gets clogged, what happens, or what can happen, is you'll get a vapor lock in your tank, and it'll collapse one of your fuel lines, and then you'll run out of gas, and it'll starve the engine of gas, and you won't be performing. So you want to keep that cleaned out, and so it doesn't clog up. The other thing is, and this will catch you if you don't do it right, when you put your gas tank lid on, this rubber gasket here, if that comes off or is over the edge a little bit, and you put this back on that way, you will now start losing fuel out of your car going through the turns, and you're likely to get black flagged. I know that from personal experience. So what I do is, when I put my gas lid back on, I just run my fingers around the edge of it to make sure that rubber isn't sticking out, and then I don't have to worry about it. So 5-gallon gas tank. Before we do any setup, we want it full. We want all our fluid levels full. The gear oil in your rear end needs to be at the right level. So that, because we'll end this seminar on scaling our car, and you want to scale it with all the fluids level. Now, 5-gallon gas tank. Will you use 5 gallons on race day? No way. But I always recommend topping it up before hot laps, before heat race, before main. Top it off, because that's weight. A gallon of gas is roughly 6.5 pounds, and a gallon of more weight in the back helps push your tires into the dirt for grip. And also, I like it for consistency standpoint. I always know my car feels the same before every race. So I always top it off, not because I'm worried about running out, because it'll only use 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons on whole race day, but it's more for weight and consistency. Okay, so we got our fluids, we got our next thing you want to do is your tires. You want them all aired up properly. On dirt, I would recommend on your left front, since this is the tire that's least being worked on the track because of the rollover to the right side of the car, you want to have, I suggest 6 pounds, which is a Pro Chassis recommendation. 6 pounds here, right front 8, left rear 8, and 10 over there on your right rear. That's a good starting point that I like. Now, some people vary a pound or two from that. For dirt, asphalt, you're going to be up in the high teens to low 20s, but we race dirt primarily here, so this is going to be a dirt setup today. So I got my tires aired up, got all my fluids, so my weight's right. Now I can start working from the back of the car to the front. And once we're done with the setup, we'll put it on scales and see if the percentages are right. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to that. Okay, this high dollar tool here, shoestring and a nut, is what I use to measure if my rear end axle is square with the chassis. And what you want to do is drape this over top of your axle and then measure. Every car has a cross member going from the left side of the car to the right side of the car, right here behind the seat. You measure from the edge of this string, once it stops swaying, up to there, and measure, record that measurement there. Do the same on the other side. And if it's the same exact length, then your rear axle is square with your cross member, and that's a good starting point. Now, some people actually have what's called lead, and lead means that the measurement on this side, the left side of the car, is a little shorter than on the right side of the car, and that is conducive to helping you turn left. And of course, we turn left, on our racetracks, so that's a good thing. So I like a 1/4 inch lead. A 1/2 inch lead is huge. I don't think you'll like that, but straight up to a 1/4 inch lead is where I think you want to be. So that is what we call lead. Let's talk a little bit about shocks and springs. Very important tuning tool for handling. And what I recommend on the dirt is what we call easy up shocks in the front and hold downs in the back. And what an easy up is, on a Bilstein part number, it's a SG6, which for 6 inch, and then a 1030 shock number. And what 1030 means is 10 is rebound and 30 is compression. So we have easy ups, meaning the compression or the rebound up is easier, lighter than the compression down. I'll get to why that's important in a minute. Let's talk about the rear springs and shocks. These are hold down shocks. The part number is SG6 4020. 40 compression or rebound, 20 compression. So it's harder to rebound in the back shocks. I got a 30-10 over here, which is a 30 rebound, 10 compression. And the whole idea is when you come out of a turn and getting on the gas, you want the easy ups in the front to lift the front of the engine up and shift the weight to the back, because when you're under acceleration, you want maximum traction so you're not spinning your wheels. And so the hold downs hold your butt into the dirt, and the easy ups shift that weight back here. And that's a great dry slick setup. Now, there's another setup for shocks for wet track, but as you know, we primarily run on dry slicks, especially for the main, when it is where it all count. So if you're slow or slower than you'd like in a heat race because of this setup, that's okay, because the main event is where it's all matters, and that's where you want to be at optimum. So I highly recommend what we call the dry slick setup. Easy ups in the front, hold downs in the back. Springs, 10-inch springs. Pro chassis setup recommendation is a 200-pound, a 180-pound spring, 140, 120. Notice that the heavier spring is on the left side of the car. That's conducive for the car to roll. you want the car to roll over onto the right side tires as you go through the turn. That's how we get through the turn, how we, the fastest that we can is to get that chassis roll. Well, if you had stiffer springs over on this side, it wouldn't roll. And on asphalt, you would have stiffer springs in the front on the right side. Still have the stiffer one on the left rear on asphalt, but you don't want as much chassis roll in an asphalt, but on dirt we definitely want that roll. So those the spring recommendations. Here's a neat thing I don't know if most people know about springs, is the angle of which this spring is tilted. 130-pound spring is 130 pounds if it's straight up and down. But if a lot of cars, most cars, the top end of this is tilted in. And the more this top end of this whole setup is tilted in, so the spring is now tilted in, you lose spring rate. So it may be a 130-pound spring, but tilted in might be really an actual 120 to 125 pounds of spring rate. But again, I recommend the 140, 130. I actually run a 150 and a 140 because I'm a little heavier, and the chassis manufacturer recommended that I weigh 240 pounds to go up to 150, 140 versus 140, 120. So that's shocks and springs. Now you want to do, because we've got the air in there and the tires correct, we want to do ride heights.